The Podcaster's Guide to the Conspiracy.
Hello, welcome to the Podcaster's Guide to the Conspiracy. My name is Josh Edison, and his name is Dr. Matthew Dentith.
That's true, although I do these days go by the name M.
Which is much more mysterious and also Bond-like.
Yes, although also the diminutive that Moriarty used. So,
yes, well, it could
there
be
you
anything.
go. It's true.
Anything.
Or, could stand for 1,000.
Oh, yes. Yes, I hadn't even thought of that.
No, I mean, it doesn't mean
There's only
anything.
one of you. You're a paradox wrapped in a
It might refer to my advanced age. My advanced age. As you can tell by the lines on my face. And the picture of Dorian Gray I keep in my attic. Because someone has to keep Dorian's picture, and it might as well be me.
Yes, I think that's right. Well, I've been on holiday for most of this week, which means Matthew has done most of the heavy lifting for this episode, and most of the light lifting as well, I think, really.
And light rearranging, just basically anything to do with light. I've been on it. The speed of light, been on that too.
Completely
It's now
rearranged.
slightly faster.
Oh, that's handy.
No, actually, it's really, really bad.
Oh, why? Does that mean you now get even heavier when you're travelling at the speed of light?
It's going to cause a lot of issues for the Mars mission. A lot of issues.
Oh, well, that's their problem, not ours. So, shall we say right at the top of the episode that we are going to be talking about Dan Brown's newest book, and there will be spoilers aplenty?
Yes, because I will not be holding back. I will be telling you the secret in the book, I'll be telling you the faults in the plot, and I'll be sighing a lot. So just be aware there will be spoilers, and there'll be lots of spoilers.
Yeah. Essentially, this is really kind of a service. Matthew has read this book so that you don't have to.
Yes. Yes. And I will say now, before we get into the meat of the episode, I do think Dan Brown can write a capable thriller. So his first Robert Langdon book, Angels and Demons, I think is a decent, gripping read, which actually has a fairly clever twist at the end. And he is a writer that is getting worse with every book. This was by far the most boring book of his I've read, and the other Robert Langdon books I've been able to read in one go, so from cover to cover in one sitting. And Origin, about 60% of the way through, I had to go to bed because it literally was sending me to sleep.
Well, with that ringing endorsement, we'll put the Dan Brown on hold for the moment, I guess, and go through.
It's very
the
easy to
week's
put
news.
Dan Brown on hold.
Breaking conspiracy theories in the news.
In local news, local spreader of misinformation, camera Whale Oil Slater, whose defamation proceedings we have mentioned before, is back in the news for more defamation proceedings. This time around it is the deliberate spreading of misinformation by him, Carrick Graham, the evil Adrian Edmondson lookalike, and ex-MP Catherine Rich, who have been allegedly defaming 3 health academics, Doug Selman, Boyd Swinburne, and Shane Bradbook, on his whale oil beef hooked.
Yeah, see, that's the joke, because if you say it in a faux Irish accent, like you're sort of a cartoon leprechaun, it kind of sounds like a rude word. It's an old joke and not a particularly good one.
So you're not actually going to do what it actually sounds like in the Irish accent.
Oh, I don't know if my Irish accent... It's not bad.
It's actually not... Well,
That's not a bad cartoon Irish
It's
accent.
better than Cassidy from Preacher, and that's pretty much the standard for Irish accents on the TV now.
It doesn't sound anything like an actual Irish person has ever sounded.
Oh no, not at all.
Not at all.
I mean,
It does sound like
if
an Irish stereotype.
You need to be talking if you're from Belfast, boy. Belfast. You need to be talking about the north.
I can't. The only North Irish accent. My North Irish accent has been informed entirely from listening to Van Morrison songs when I was a child that my parents used to play.
See, I'd say mine's been informed by listening to parodies of Van Morrison songs that I listened to in the 90s.
I can talk about the moonlight on your face, but apart from that,
is that a reference?
Not really. No, that's the only phrase I remember from the songs. Anyway.
Sounds a bit rude.
Irish accents aside.
Anyway, the allegation is that Slater and Graham were paid by Rich, who now heads the Food and Grocery Council, to attack the health academics, who were questioning issues to do with the regulation, or lack thereof in some cases, around alcohol, sugar, fat and tobacco in Aotearoa, New Zealand.
Now, we've talked previously about the role Cameron Slater played in the dirty politics scandal of the 2014 election, and it was the publicity of Nikki Hager's book that revealed to Salmon, Swinburne and Braddock the rationale behind what had otherwise been weird attack pieces on Slater's blog. It's all meat for the grinder that A, conspiracies are rife in politics, and B, conspiracies are tested in court every damn day.
Meanwhile, MH370, one of our earliest stories, is back in the news. Not as in we now know what happened to the flight, because we don't. Rather because we don't, and the search for the wreckage has basically come to a close.
Some of the family members are not very happy, however, that the wreckage and the remains of their loved ones will, unless there is some kind of miracle, remain lost at sea. We don't think there are any claims of conspiracy by Malaysia to cover up what happened. This is just the sad end to a mysterious disappearance where we're left with more questions than answers.
Meanwhile, the trial of Sita Aisha and Duan Tiwan over the death of Kim Jong-nam, the estranged brother of North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, has started in Malaysia.
Now, we've talked about the Alexander Litvinenko-style assassination of Kim Jong-nam previously on this podcast, and the various conspiracy theories swirling around his death. Most people suspect Kim Jong-un ordered his brother's death, but perhaps the most interesting part of the alleged conspiracy is that the pair claim to be unwilling dupes, patsies, if you will, for the North Koreans, claiming that they thought they were playing a harmless prank for a hidden camera TV show, and are thus claiming to be not guilty of Kim Jong-nam's murder.
They claim the two men, one North Korean and one the other... Actually, I can't really do that with the...
We can put a
video
little
thing.
edit in. I'm sure
Well,
it'll be
okay.
seamless. Totally seamless. No one will ever know.
I feel as if I should change tops now
Yes.
or put on a fake tie. They claim the two men, one North Korean and the other Chinese, got them to malls, hotels and airports to rub oil or pepper sauce on strangers, which he would then film on his phone and pay them $200 for each prank. The alleged masterminds of the pranks hid in the North Korean embassy after Kim Jong-nam's death to avoid questioning, and eventually were allowed to fly home to North Korea in exchange for 9 Malaysians who were trapped there.
We'll keep you updated on what the court thinks of this prank hypothesis.
And now, America.
Is this Trump news?
Trump adjacent.
I'll allow it as long as it's about a crazy sheriff.
It is. Well, it's news about an ex-sheriff, one Joe Arpaio. Apparently he's hot on the hunt for Obama's birth certificate.
Again?
Again. There's actually not much more to say about him other than you'd think that this issue could be put to rest now. I mean, America has bigger issues to deal with.
Which I guess gets us to the latest mass shooting, this time in Vegas. Our views on gun control are well known, as is our exasperation with the claim that it's never the right time to talk about gun control. But that's by the by. As usual with events of this kind, there are various theories going around, including claims about multiple shooters, the lack of an apparent motive, and questions about the killer's large arsenal.
Large arsenal.
It's funny because people died.
Yeah, that's... No, I can't go on now. But I will.
Yes.
The killer himself was quickly identified as one Stephen Paddock, but not quickly enough. Almost immediately following the attack, hoaxes started emanating from some right-wing sites, which claimed the shooter was someone else, a Democrat who liked Rachel Maddow, MoveOn.org, and associated with the anti-Trump anti-Trump
army.
I preferred Big Arsenal. Anti-Trump army is much harder to say, although I can say it now.
Yes.
I'll try that again. The shooter was someone else, a Democrat who liked Rachel Maddow, MoveOn.org, and associated with the anti-Trump army.
Yes.
That one from the Gateway Pundit blog. These stories appeared far and wide thanks to Facebook and Google's sharing algorithms. Truly, we live in an age of wonder.
And that was, for want of a better word, the news. And so to the main topic. I think I can probably just shut my laptop now because I'm pretty sure most of this is Matthew going to be telling me, for I have not read this book, and all of us, about Dan Brown's new book.
I'm sure some listeners have read the book. Some of you
Might have.
shared my pain. Some of you have been with me in the trenches of reading Dan Brown's prose. It occurs to me, actually, I probably should have selected some snippets of Dan Brown's extraordinary use of adjectives, but I didn't. So you'll have to go read the book to find out just how...
Does it have the same opening sentence as all of his books?
Oh, the bit actually. So that this right. Most people who know about Dan Brown will know that at the beginning of his Robert Langdon books, there's a fact: all organisations, architecture, alien races, etc., described in this book are real. Now, I read the book on Kindle, and what's interesting about the Kindle version of the book is that it jumps straight to the introduction and actually avoids that page. So if you open up a Kindle book on a Kindle app or on a Kindle device, it takes you to the very first bit of prose you're meant to read. So it skips over the title page, the acknowledgements, etc. And so that bit wasn't there when I initially looked, but then I went back and yes, once again, he has claimed that all of the organisations mentioned in the book, in this case, it's an organisation called the Palmarian Church, which we'll get onto in a minute, and the architecture, which is all in Spain, because the book is set in Madrid and Barcelona, are described accurately. Now, of course, he said this in the Da Vinci Code, and at the end of the Da Vinci Code, he then describes a sculpture in the middle of Paris incorrectly. And so we have to take it that this is part of the fiction. The claim everything in the book is factual is in fact a fictive claim about the contents of the book.
Do we need to justify why we're devoting an episode to talking about Dan Brown? I almost feel like we don't. He is kind of... He's possibly the biggest popularizer of conspiracy theory type stuff.
Yes, although it's kind of curious because, of course, he came to prominence on the back of the Da Vinci Code. And the Da Vinci Code talks about the conspiracy by elements within the Catholic Church to hide the existence of the Jesus bloodline. But of course, the first Robert Langdon book, Angels and Demons, actually kind of does a reversal of that. So the nominal villains of Angels and Demons are the Illuminati, who have a plot to assassinate and get away with the murder of the current Pope of the Roman Catholic Church. And the twist in Angels and Demons is the Illuminati don't exist. So they're acknowledged as being a historical Bavarian society, but the Illuminati, which is directing the assassins in Angels and Demons, isn't an organization. It's the papal chamberlain, who basically wants to eradicate the Pope, who turns out to be his father, so that he can then be declared pontiff of the Roman Catholic Church. So the first book goes, there's a massive conspiracy to kill the Pope. And then the revelation is actually, no, it's just a standard murder. One person designed it, but he fooled someone into thinking there is a conspiracy. And we're going to see shades of that in Origin, because Origin very much is the best hits of the Robert Langdon series. Book 5 feels very much like a repeat of things he's done before.
Right, well, so start us off then. Is it best to go through things chronologically and show us the setup and then the wacky twist at the end, or would you prefer to just give us...
Let me tell you basically what the book is. Robert Langdon is invited to the Guggenheim in Spain to attend a talk by a former student of his, Edmund Kirsch, who is going to reveal a big secret about the world, which is where we came from and where we're going. And about 100 pages in, I read it on the Kindle. The book is 461 pages in hardback. It's around about 30% of the way through the book. Edmund Kirsch gets murdered. Halfway through his discussion, before he gets to the point of where we come from and where we're going. So the first part of the book is Langdon attending a really, really trite, overly orchestrated TED Talk. And then, because it's his former student, he wants to unlock what his student was about to say. So they avoid the assassin, they flee back to Edmund Kirsch's house to find the passcode that will get them into the computer, which has the other half of the presentation. They then have to locate where that computer is because the presentation was being triggered remotely. And then they go to that house, and then they trigger the other part of the presentation, which goes up online for the world to see, and then the book ends. So basically you have a large chunk of the book is a really, really trite TED Talk about human origins, which is why the book is called Origin, with a little bit of excitement in the middle where they go from Madrid to Barcelona, and then from Barcelona back to Madrid. Oh, and also should point out, as is standard in a Robert Langdon novel, there is an assassin who is motivated by some deep trauma in their life, and he commits the assassination and then spends 80% of the book in an Uber from from Madrid to Barcelona,
Nice.
and then dies.
So is it full of all the wacky sort of hidden symbols and things that need to be figured out and decoded and stuff? Which, wouldn't you know it, Robert Langdon, expert in, what is he, expert in symbology?
Although actually Brown has kind of made him more into a semiotician this time round. So I think he's gone, there is no such thing as a symbologist or symbology departments, but there are semiotics departments. So I'll just, we'll talk about semiotics slightly more than we'll talk about symbols this time around. But no. Dan Brown has answered the question that no one asked. What if you wrote a Robert Langdon novel where he doesn't solve any puzzles? So there really aren't, well, so there is a puzzle. The puzzle is that Edmund Kirsch has encoded the presentation with a 47 character passcode, which is based upon one of his favourite poems, which happens to be a prophecy. So you think that's going to be the... Langdon will travel all around Spain to try and find the clues as to exactly what this 47 character passcode is. But actually, all they need to do is find Kirsch's favourite book, and then work out which 47 character stanza in that book turns out to be the passcode. And Langdon is kind of reduced down to solving simple puzzles like, oh, that looks like a papal cross, but actually no, it's not. It's actually a covert symbol for an Uber taxi. And oh, the sign ampersand, which most people think is the word and, is actually the Latin word it, which is et. So if you were to expand ampersand into a word, you wouldn't go and, you'd go et instead. And that's basically as far as the puzzle solving in this book goes.
That's
boring.
Yes, that is
very, very boring.
Okay, well, hit us then. There's a twist, I assume. There's a shocking revelation at the end of some kind. Please?
Right, let me just...
Please, God, let there be something.
So, there is, but to explain it, let me tell you about former twists that Dan Brown has engaged in. So, the twist in Angels and Demons is the Illuminati don't exist, which is actually... It's a clever twist because the entire book is predicated on the notion that they do exist, but then it turns out it's a plot by the papal chamberlain. So it actually is a clever twist. The twist in the Da Vinci Code is that there is a bloodline of Jesus Christ and Mary Magdalene. The twist in the lost symbol is that the most important work that the Freemasons have based their belief system on is the King James Bible. So they're hiding the King James Bible, a book you can find in any bookstore anywhere in the world from the public. As twists go, it makes no sense in any way, shape or form. The twist in Inferno is that Robert Langdon is racing to stop a virus which will make infertile a large section of the population, which turns out to have been released a week prior to the events of the book. And the twist in Origin is abiogenesis and the singularity.
I assume one being the origin of the life and the other where life is headed to?
Yes, and what makes the twist so banal and yet for Dan Brown so interesting is that throughout the book, because they know that Kirsch is trying to reveal the origin of life on Earth, it seems that people can only think of two rival hypotheses. Either creationism, God did it, or some notion that life came from space, so either extraterrestrials or panspermia, that life was seeded on Earth via comets. So when he reveals that actually the laws of physics, or the laws of nature, allow life to appear spontaneously on Earth anyway, that's taken to be a ground-shaking, epoch-making discovery, despite the fact that it's really not.
No. Does he just introduce the concept of abiogenesis, that being life arising from non-living chemical processes? does he claim? Is it like he invents the whole concept, or does he just say yes, that's what happened?
Well, alright, so in Brown's favour, he does come up with a hypothesis which explains how complex life arises from simple systems and what should be an entropic universe by coming up with a principle of entropy, whereby the entropic nature of the universe sometimes has to create ordered systems to create more effective entropy. So life forms, he takes it, are really good entropic systems because we take energy out and then we produce basically heat and light as a consequence. So he goes, well look, the only way to explain why in an entropic universe complex life forms occur is there must be a principle of entropy which allows complexity to arise. But basically that just means he doesn't understand what people mean by entropy in the universe. So he's proposing a solution to a problem that no one thinks is a problem.
Yes, because thinking back to my high school physics, the thing is entropy in a closed system always increases, but the planet Earth is not a closed system because we've got energy pouring into us from the sun all the time.
Basically.
So localized decreases in entropy are possible, even though the entropy of the whole larger system is always increasing.
Yeah, I mean, entropy is increasing in the universe as a whole, but in localized spaces like this, you'll get increased complexity because in a localized space, we are not a closed system, we're an open system. The other secret is where we're going. Now, the entire book is predicated on Kursk giving a version of his talk to 3 religious leaders, a prominent Roman Catholic, a prominent Jewish scholar, and a prominent Islamic scholar. And in his version of the presentation, he reveals where we're going, which is that within 20 to 30 years, the human race is going to be wiped out by a life form that already exists on the Earth. So he's created a stupendous computer model of where life came from and where life is going, and that model predicts our extinction. And because of this, we're meant to treat the claim that religious leaders will see a computer model and go, yep, well that seals it. That shows that actually we're about to be wiped out, as opposed to what most normal people would do, which was, that's a really interesting computer model. We should probably go away and do some further tests. Or, computer modelling isn't quite what it's cracked out to be. Now, it turns out that actually the version of the presentation he shows the religious leaders is only part of the story, because what he's talking about is human-machine symbiosis. So the life form that's already on the planet is technology, and it's not that they're going to wipe us out in a Skynet situation. He actually does make a crude reference to Terminator in the book.
Well, it's something.
Yeah, I actually tweeted, that sounds like a Skynet situation, then one paragraph later he mentions the film Terminator. Okay, so yep, got it.
Yep, pop culture reference.
But actually it's going to be symbiosis. It's going to be humanity will change into a kind of cyborg-like collective. And Kirsch thinks that's a positive thing, and when the only sole surviving religious leader from the original presentation realizes that, he goes, well, it's actually not as bad as it's made out to be. But once again, the singularity isn't that startling if you've followed anything to do with these things.
New concept.
No, not at all.
Again, my understanding of the singularity, and correct me if I've got this wrong, is the idea that in the near future, I mean, we're almost at the point now where cybernetic prosthetics can actually perform better than the parts of the body that they're replacing. Not really, but in the case of this Euroscope Pistorius sort of running legs, I think it is possible to make now already legs that can make you run faster than a normal human being. So the idea is that...
They won't get you off a crime.
No, unfortunately. So the idea is that...
Unfortunately, are you saying that Oscar Pistorius should have got off?
Sorry, yes. I mean, the entire situation was a very unfortunate situation.
Well, that's much better.
Yes.
Callous bastard.
No, so the idea is that cybernetic prosthetic technology is going to get better and better and better until you get people not simply replacing damaged body parts with cybernetics, but choosing to trade perfectly functional body parts for cybernetics that do the job better, which will eventually result in the human race becoming a race of cyborgs. And depending on how cosmological you want to get about it, they eventually talk about how eventually we're all just going to be machine intelligences, which will set about converting the entire universe into more and more computing power, which will take space over, depending on whether or not faster than light travel is possible, a relatively short amount of time or a very, very long amount of time. But so the singularity that they talk about is the end point where every atom in the universe has been pressed into the service of creating this giant human machine consciousness.
Yes, which is the very Pierre Teilhard de Chardin idea of the omega point, where the universe becomes one large thinking organism, which Teilhard takes it to be the teleological end of God's evolutionary process.
So is that what he's talking about then?
Kind of.
Right.
I mean, it doesn't really get into any particular depth about both abiogenesis and the singularity. It's more that these are shocking revelations that will change people's view of where the world is going. And they're really not. I mean, the end of the book does feel like the end of the lost symbol, where when it gets revealed that the Freemasons' biggest secret is the King James Bible, you end up going, really? And there was an assassin trying to stop that from getting out? That doesn't seem like a particularly big thing to keep secret. Why would you keep that secret from people?
And what of this assassin anyway? Why did people feel the need to have this dude assassinated?
Oh, well, right, so herein lies the issue, and this may or may not be a clever plot point depending on what you think about reading the book as a whole. So, a big chunk of the story is dedicated to talking about the Palmarian Church. Now, the Palmarian Church is a schismatic Spanish sect of Roman Catholicism that claims that the Holy See of Rome has been vacated, I think, since the early 70s. So basically, the modern popes are anti-popes, they're not the real popes, and the See of the Holy Roman Catholic See is now located in Spain. And it's a very, 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 very conservative version of Roman Catholicism. Now, the Palmarian Church does exist. It's a very, very minor sect in the real world. It's taken to be a very rich, secretive organization in the world of origin. And the assassin of our story, a Spanish naval officer by the name of Avila, has become a member of the Palmarian Church after a bombing in a cathedral in Spain. So basically you have this entire storyline where his family were wiped out by religious terrorists. He can't forgive them, so he wants to destroy those who funded them, and he's been led to believe that Edmund Kursk is the person who funded these terrorists that destroyed the cathedral. And so he's sent on what he takes to be a mission of the Pope of the Palmarian Church to kill Kursk before Kursk can reveal what's going on. And throughout the entire book, you have Avila chasing after Kursk and then Langdon and company to stop the secret from coming out, and people spreading information about the Palmarian Church and theories about what's in Kursk's presentation via this thing called a website called conspiracynet.com. Now, sidebar on conspiracynet.com. Conspiracynet.com is a real address you can go to on the web, but it obviously wasn't an address that the publishers of Origin ever thought about trying to buy. Because if I had written a book where I had conspiracynet.com as chapters within the book and news reports, I would have bought that address, put those reports up there, and created a kind of viral marketing campaign thing. But Doubleday don't seem to have done that. So if you go to conspiracynet.com, it's basically a this page is under construction site. And that makes me wonder whether Dan Brown isn't quite the big author he was back in the Da Vinci Code days. Because you can imagine in the Da Vinci Code days, the publishers would have been all over stuff like this. And this time round, someone must have thought we should probably register that website or buy it and set something up, and went, oh, it's just a Dan Brown novel, no one cares.
Or at the very least, register it to make sure that someone else doesn't see the
Precisely.
book, register it and put,
And put pornography
hardcore
on it.
pornography. Yes, that is exactly
Yeah,
the
I
first
was
place
actually,
my mind went.
as I was reading the book, I went to the site and went, actually, is it possible to purchase this domain? But no, it's not. Otherwise, I would own conspiracynet.com, and that would be fantastic.
It would.
Uh,
Maybe you could buy conspiracycom.net.
Oh, I like your thinking. Anyway, so the Palmyrian Church is taken to be the villain of the piece. But actually, the villain of the piece is the villain of the piece from Angels and Demons, in the fact that the Palmyrian Church is not behind the conspiracy to kill Edmund Kursk. It turns out the person who's behind the death of Edmund Kursk, who's ordered all of these things, is the AI that Edmund Kursk programmed to do the computer modelling in the first place.
Ooh la la.
So basically it's a giant publicity stunt that admittedly Kursk wasn't aware of, but the AI has gone the best way to get Kursk's story out is for him to die during the presentation to build up interest in what he's got to say. And because the AI is taken to be amoral, or at least lack any notion of morality in the story, the AI has no guilt when confronted with the evidence of its crime to go, yes, I did the thing to get the story out, and also I'm being deleted in 12 hours' time because the system is designed that once Edmund dies, I die 12 hours later. 13 hours later.
That sounds like a much less interesting version of Injection, the ongoing Warren Ellis comic.
I have not read Injection. Maybe we should do a episode on Injection.
We should. A little précis. It's up to issue 14 at the moment, I think. The idea is that you have this bunch of sort of futurologists, or rather a bunch of sort of people who are experts in weird fields, who get brought together to predict where the sort of human civilization is heading, and all their models predict that sometime in the next few decades human advancement is just going to stagnate and nothing new or interesting is going to happen for a long period. And so to mix things up a bit, they create a weird wacky artificial intelligence and put it out into the world, where it immediately starts doing weird wacky things and they realise they've made a horrible mistake and have to clean things up.
Yeah.
But it's quite good. It's very deliberately going doing versions of sort of popular British science fiction things. So the first story arc is kind of Quatermass-ish. The second story arc is a fairly twisted Sherlock Holmes story. The third one, which is the one it's in the middle of now, is quite Doctor Who-ish. And then there's the next one. I think there are at least 5 arcs planned, one for each of the 5 specialists. The fifth one is basically James Bond. And the last one apparently is like Thomas Carnacki, who I don't really know a lot about other than him being sort of a supernatural Sherlock Holmes.
Who's it been published by?
Image, I think.
Oh, okay.
But yes, so that's quite it's an interesting one, especially because sort of at the beginning when they're talking about this idea of an artificial intelligence, one of them mentions that she made an artificial intelligence, but she sort of says why would an artificial intelligence have to be an artificial human intelligence? And so made one which apparently could pass the Turing test, but weirded everyone out.
And fair enough too. Fair enough too.
So I'd recommend reading Injection if you like that sort of science fictional thing, because it's been very good so far.
Good. I am pleased.
Yes, so I read something that I enjoyed greatly.
And I did not.
You did not so much.
Yeah, so, I mean, Origin is a very boring book. Not much happens in it, so it does feel like it's a TED Talk that Dan Brown wrote and then had to fit Robert Langdon in the middle. And I'm also wondering whether it wasn't a Robert Langdon story originally. So Dan Brown has written other thrillers that don't feature Robert Langdon in the past. And I believe in interviews has indicated he would like to write a non-Robert Langdon story again. And I haven't read his 2 non-Robert Langdon stories, which are Deception Point and the other one which isn't Deception Point. But many reviewers have compared Origin to Deception Point. And I do wonder whether maybe he wrote a thriller about an AI killer and the origin of life itself, and then the publisher went, we need a Robert Langdon book. That's the stuff that sells. It's not Dan Brown that sells. It's Harvard symbologist Robert Langdon who sells. And maybe he had to retool the story. But yes, it's a Dan Brown novel where Robert Langdon, the famous symbologist from Harvard, doesn't really solve any puzzles and encounters a bunch of tropes from previous stories he's been in.
The thing that I've always heard about Dan Brown books, though, is that he was always excellent at writing page turners. That while it may be banal drivel, every chapter ends with you wanting to find out what happens next. From what you're saying, that's less the case in this one.
Normally that is the case. He's usually fairly good at setting up a disastrous situation that the protagonist cannot escape from. And you have to go, oh, I need to know what happened next. And then the next chapter, or either cut away so you don't find out for a chapter, or be a startling revelation of Robert Langdon's physical prowess which allows him to survive. And this time round, often that stuff occurs in the next paragraph. There's one point where Langdon is trying to avoid being killed by Avila, and he's in a situation where it looks like he's about to die. Normally that would be the chapter stop, and then there'll be a cutaway and then come back to it, but the next paragraph then reveals Avila's fate. So it's almost as if he's lost the knack of writing the page turner, or whoever he was working with in the past, who was going, no, that should be a chapter stop there, isn't doing that work anymore. Because yes, it's just a remarkably banal book. And I mean, Inferno I thought was particularly badly written. But Inferno is a much better novel than Origin. Much better.
Right, well it feels like we've spent long enough shitting on Dan Brown and everything he's responsible for. Do you have any final points? Any little
I just want to
notes
go...
to get to?
I've spent 5 hours reading that book. 5 hours that felt like a lot of work for no real reward. No real reward at all.
Oh, that's a shame. Maybe next time I must dig out the couple of books I read last year. I'm not a big reader, it has to be said. But last year, over our summer holidays, I was down at a beach place where there wasn't really much else to do apart from read whatever books were lying around. And I read basically whatever books were lying around that looked interesting. And two of them were one of them was basically Dan Brown plus right-wing conservative Christian stuff.
This isn't the Genesis Code by any chance, is it?
No, I can't remember that. Maybe I should have looked it up before this, or I should look it up again and talk about it another time.
First, if we look up Dan Brown, but religiously conservative, you keep talking, I'll look it up.
The story I read, which apparently was like the 8th in the series or something, is about a former priest who left the seminary, is that priest school?
Seminary, priest school.
Left the seminary and instead became a soldier for hire, special forces SAS guy, and now ends up getting drawn into religious-based conspiracies from the sounds of things. So the one I read was where people had discovered the sword that was owned by Jesus Christ himself.
Sorry, Jesus Christ owned a sword.
Well, he did. There is a bit in the Bible, isn't it, where he tells people to sell your cloak and buy a sword or something.
I don't then remember him. And here's my sword.
Well, apparently there was a sword that was owned by Jesus Christ, and it turns out a big conspiracy, which is largely driven by there's the shady Illuminati organisation who have a remarkably hands-off approach to things, and that they get this guy who's just an absolute psychopath who hates all religion and everything it stands for to do something. And it turns out that the big conspirators don't actually give a shit about whether or not the sword proves the existence of Jesus Christ or not. But this guy's so anti-religious, he wants to murder horribly anyone who might possibly have proof that anything to do with Christianity is real.
Let me look up Jesus Christ sword book.
Jesus Christ sword book.
Yep, that sounds like
that's essentially the other book I read, which is a lot more interesting, also I can't remember who it was by or what it was called, was about...
let me say, there's a book called The Teenage Years of Jesus Christ.
Oh, I want to read that. The Savage Sword of Jesus Christ by Grant Morrison. Good God.
No,
I don't think you're going to find it there.
No.
I'd have to go. I'd have to go back and hunt it. It was a guy I'd never heard of. I'm pretty sure I sent you an email at the time. You'd never heard of them, and obviously you've forgotten about it now. So unmemorable was it. There's another one about its Secret Society of Alchemists. But rather than sitting here telling you how I can't remember the details of a book I read a year ago, maybe I should go back, find the details of that book, and maybe I can do my own sort of book review-y episode.
Yeah, that
maybe
sounds...
not next episode, but maybe sometime in the future.
I'm searching for old emails and I find an email from 2001 where we're going to see Butterfly and Sword.
What?
Yeah, I have no memory.
What the hell is that?
I'm assuming it's a film.
It's an email I sent, and
Yep.
I have no idea what it's talking about.
I'm up for Butterfly and Sword this evening, although Richard can't make it. Will you be there? Must have been a really, really crazy night of very exciting sexual acts.
I cannot imagine what that could mean.
I'm-
I also cannot imagine how uninteresting it is for people to watch the two of us
Look
read
at
an
an
old
email,
email
yeah,
and not
from
understand what it's
2001.
about. Right,
Welcome
so,
to the podcast's Guide to the Conspiracy, bringing you cutting-edge content all the time.
Yes, no, I'll have to find out, otherwise it's going to bother me, and I suspect you from now until the end of time.
Josh Jesus.
Possibly mentioned that. It would have been January this year. Anyway, maybe, I'm just going to put this out there, maybe now is not the time to hunt down my old email.
Okay, alright, I'll put it down.
We'll
I'll
find
put
it
it down.
later.
I'll put it down. It's
Yes.
down. It's down.
So it sounds very much to me as though we've come to the end of an episode.
It really has. I think we've muddled through Dan Brown's latest conspiracy muddle, and that's basically
And
it.
hopefully, if the resounding spoilers haven't put you off reading it, hopefully Matthew's less than favourable opinion will have done the job.
Yes, and I'll put down. I spent my own good money on that book.
For you, he did it for you.
Yeah,
because he
specifically the
cares.
person who's listening to this right now.
So, you have been watching / listening to the podcaster's Guide to the Conspiracy. My name is Josh Addison. If you want to get in touch with me on Twitter, you could do so with the handle Monkey Fluids. I'm sitting here in Auckland, New Zealand, and so is this man.
Yes.
Tell us about yourself, sir.
Well, I publish under the name Matthew R.X. Dentith, or increasingly M.R.X. Dentith. I'm a conspiracy theory theorist. I have a blog, which is episto.org. I have 2 Twitter accounts, Conspiracism for all your conspiracy theory needs. And if you want to see what it was like to read Origin, I live tweeted the event, so go to Conspiracism and look at the Origin hashtag, and you'll find a lot of snarky comments about Dan Brown. And I also have a non-conspiracy theory related Twitter account, which is H.O. Ransom, which is mostly me waxing lyrical on political things here in Aotearoa, New Zealand, and sometimes talking about my lunch.
So this podcast / vodcast has been going up on YouTube. Probably the easiest way to find it on YouTube is simply search for Podcaster's Guide to the Conspiracy. It's also available in podcast form on iTunes, on Stitcher, on a few other things. It's hosted at podbean.com, so if you go to conspiracism.podbean.com, you'll find the source, the real deal, the secret source. I've got a little bit sidetracked there.
The origin of
The
where this all
origin,
began.
indeed, origins.
The lost symbol of our youth.
Let that be the thing.
The
So,
inferno that rages in our groins.
yeah,
And the Da Vinci Code,
laptop's not
which
that hot, but
which
yes, it's getting
makes
there.
us the humans that we are today, because we're both angels and demons. He's an angel, I'm a demon.
Yes, it turns out we were Robert Langdon all along,
Well, we're all Robert Langdon on the inside.
in a sense.
We're all tweed suits.
Regardless, wherever you happen to be listening to this podcast, if that's what you're doing, feel free to leave us comments and ratings and all of that business that gives us some evidence that human beings out there are listening to us. So we do get comments, we do get people justifying our sitting here
Yeah.
for an hour or so a week,
And
which is
we-
nice. We like that. We'd like more of that.
Yeah,
actually.
and we also have the ability for you to give us money to fund this podcast / vodcast, or maybe send some money our way to cover the cost of reading Origin. I don't just mean the cost of buying the book, but also
emotional
the emotional
cost,
cost I'll be dealing with for many months to come.
Mm.
And you can find that on our Podbean site,
Yes,
or
you
we
can.
have a Patreon system. So you go to Patreon, find the Podcaster's Guide to the Conspiracy, and then you can fling money at us like money flingers in a
Yes.
market.
And we'll catch it and then do stuff with it.
Oh, we
which I think
will.
is the plan.
We'll do stuff with the money.
So, we're done? I think we're done.
I think we're
I
done.
think we're done. So all that remains is to say goodbye.
Yes.
I think that's literally true.
Unless something really big happens in the next week, we'll be back to false flags next
we will.
week.
So you've got that to look forward to.
Yes.
Righto. Any last pot shots at Dan Brown? Want to defame his character a little bit? Say something rude about his mother?
No,
No,
I
you've
just
had
feel that. Well, actually, I will say one thing. It takes Dan Brown 3 to 4 years to write a book, which makes me think the first drafts must be really, really, really bad if it takes that long to then produce what is a fairly, these days, C-list thriller.
C-list, nice.
Yeah,
Nice
I mean, if I could,
barb at the end there.
if I got the money Dan Brown got to do the quality of writing he does, my life would be so easy. But instead I have to publish 3 or 4 academic articles a year which are peer-reviewed for no money whatsoever.
Righto, well, long story short, Origin's not good. Up yours, Dan Brown.
And I'm off to write a conspiracy thriller novel about a cat who can see through time.
Excellent. So, from the podcaster's guide to the conspiracy, it's goodbye from me.
And it's goodbye from him.
You stole that joke.
I did.
Excellent.
I should have put my glasses on actually.
Well, they're not here, so we'll just have to say goodbye.
Bye.
You've been listening to the podcaster's Guide to the Conspiracy, starring Josh Addison and Matthew R.X. Dentith, and produced by Matthew R.X. Dentith. If you've enjoyed the podcaster's Guide to the Conspiracy, why not contribute to our Patreon or Podbean patron page? And you can contact us on podcastconspiracy@gmail.com. That's podcastconspiracy@gmail.com.